Hi, I'm Darleen Pryds. I'd like to start today by asking you a question. How are you feeling? No, really. How are you feeling these days? What are the emotions you're experiencing? Do any of them surprise you? Do you even recognize yourself or those that you're sheltering in place with from these emotions? For me, these days feel a little bit like the weeks and months after my dad died. During that time, I felt a whole range of emotions, sometimes cycling through at astonishing speed, but usually creating a discomfort for me and, frankly, likely for the people around me. It took me a good long while to make sense of that emotional range I experienced during those weeks and months. Eventually, I came to understand that my experiences stemmed from grief. Grief is triggered by loss of some form. When we experience a loss of a person or a way of life, maybe familiar habits, even thoughts and ideas. Several psychologists and experts have noted that what a lot of us are feeling during this shelter-in-place time is grieving. We've lost some things, haven't we? What does our respective grieving and communal grieving look like? Grief can hit us in both expected and unexpected ways, but one way to identify it is through our emotions. It's interesting to note that Francis of Assisi experienced a full range of emotions, and many of these point to his grief from losses he experienced. Now, we know Francis gave up a lot in his life, and he did so voluntarily, but that doesn't mean it was easy. In fact, Francis could be sarcastic, angry, even petulant. In short, he was a moody guy. The stories told especially by his companions point to this side of Francis that we often don't talk about, and it's really hard to find images that point to that far-ranging emotional side of him. His companions knew well enough that nothing could make Francis more irritated or angry than his fellow friars when they didn't live up to his expectations. There are a lot of stories in the tradition that point to Francis's anger, but one comes from just after he resigned from leadership of the order. Upon his retirement, Francis entered into the final phases of his life, and he experienced volatile emotions as he saw the order move in directions other than his wishes. One day, he was asked how he could possibly give up leadership of his order, and he said, "Oh, I love the brothers, but if they would follow my footsteps, I would surely love them more, and I would not make myself a stranger to them. For there are some among the prelates who draw them in a different direction." Hey, do you ever have a conversation and then stew over it later, especially when you're trying to sleep? Yeah, so did Francis. Later that night, after that conversation, he shot up in bed and angrily wailed, "Who are these people? They've snatched out of my hands my religion and that of my brothers." And then, in time, feeling defeated and maybe even overwhelmed, he conceded, "Oh, let them live any way they want." Francis was grieving over the loss of the plans he had for religious life. He was grieving the loss of his own influence and maybe even his own authority. The loss even of the hope that his vision for the proper way of spiritual life would ever be lived out. But out of all of these losses, fully and uncomfortably grieved, his life grew richer. Over time, he was able to loosen his attachment to how things should be and came to an acceptance of how things are. Admittedly, his acceptance was grudgingly at first. But during the last 6 years of his life, he shows us how to let go of attachments, let go of expectation, all in order to allow more and more of Christ's real presence to be experienced. And he found that presence throughout all of creation. When he was finally able to welcome Sister Death, he had let go of all of his attachments. But that had taken him a lifetime and a lot of grieving. Along the way, there were a lot of different emotions, too. Now, there's obviously a lot more that I can say about this, but for now, during these uncertain days that we're in, I'd like to draw attention to how Francis did not deny or suppress his emotions. He didn't run away from them, even the unpleasant emotions of anger, bitterness, or sarcasm. Similarly, his companions and other early writers didn't hide these stories. Instead, these volatile emotions remain in the texts. Why? Well, I think one reason is so that we don't make a mere caricature out of Francis. But he also shows us what we can learn from the fullness of his emotions. The emotions in Francis's life became important thresholds, important markers for him and for us, if we are curious about them. Is there something out of sync with my relationships? What is it that I'm clinging to? And how can I let go of that and grow in my awareness of God's presence? So in these days of shelter in place, if you find yourself or those around you a little moody, I suggest you turn to Francis for some assurance. It's okay to feel all that you're feeling. It's even okay to express all of that. But don't let it end there. What are your emotions telling you to let go of? And what do you find in the space that remains? Francis found God. If you're interested in exploring the role of emotions more fully, I invite you to participate in an online retreat that I'm be giving this summer with Franciscan mentors. Faith for Real Life, Franciscan Spirituality, and Emotional Range.